Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Getting kind of tired of the continuous skinwalker and magic threads. Let's have a change of pace. Post unexplained events. Greentext is preferred. I'll start. Be last night around 9 p.m. Waiting in front of a friend's house in my car for him to get back from work so we could pick up our other friends. Sitting in my car watching YouTube. Check the side mirror just randomly. See at the edge of the woods between two houses, a figure looking in the direction of my car. Focus on it, but it is under a broken streetlight and is hard to see. Looks like a woman with glasses just standing very still. Weird, but not too unusual. Carry on watching my phone. Look up again and see the same figure still standing exactly where it was. It's now been 15 minutes. Get the idea that it is my girlfriend messing with me since she lives in the development as well. Call her, but as I look at the figure, it is holding its hand up to its ear like it's answering a phone. So I figure it's my girlfriend and start getting annoyed. Girlfriend answers and says she is at the bank. Start getting nervous, hang up and look in the mirror again. Standing as it has been, stare at it for a while. It's now been about 30 minutes. See headlights coming down the road. It's my buddy. As soon as light hits the figure, it runs in the woods between the houses and is gone. As it ran, I got a good look at it. It looked like a woman in her 20s wearing a purple sweater and jeans. Never seen this person before in the neighborhood. Buddy asks who that was, and I tell him the story. He agrees that it was weird, but doesn't think too much about it. Pretty weird. Maybe it was a friend of one of our neighbors messing with me, I don't know. Creeper me out, though.
10-year-old me. Live in a rural area at the time, have fields that surround my house, and a patch of woods further back on one side in the distance. Outside, jumping on a trampoline one day. Happened to glance and notice something in the distance. About a half-mile away into one of the rice fields, see a person walking. Rice fields are flooded with levees built around them. This guy, thing, is walking, almost trying to run through them. No farm trucks around, no nearby highways or buildings, except for elderly neighbors who are further away near neighborhood entrance. Whatever the hell this thing is, it is hurrying west, with nothing in his path besides the woods about a mile away. It makes no sense because there were some dirt roads that could take you there with a few turns. Run inside, tell parents, and grab binoculars. Run outside and zoom in on him. He's already made it to the next rice field. Now this is the first part that genuinely freaked me out. I couldn't get a good close-up on whatever it was, but it was solid black. No clothes, just this slender, dull black figure that had an almost mummified texture. I could see its appendages were very thin and bone-like. Shit bricks and hand-dad binoculars. He looks at it for a while, almost dumbfounded. I could tell he was scared, but trying to stay cool so I wouldn't be any more frightened. He rushes me and Mom into the house. Watch through the window with binoculars as it continues pacing towards the woods. Eventually gets close to the edge of the forest. Dad has binoculars. I can only barely see him at the edge of the woods in the distance. Here's the other part that really freaked me and my family out. From what I saw that day, I thought the thing just disappeared. I saw the figure far in the distance 1 second, eyes locked on it, and the next second it just disappeared. My dad dropped the binoculars and we all stayed at our aunt's house for the next few nights. It freaked us out so badly. We eventually moved mainly because of this. Flash forward to when I was 15. We ended up in discussion about what had happened that day, and my dad admitted to me. He said that day it didn't just disappear like I had thought. He saw it close enough through the binoculars and said that it stopped still in the edge of the last rice field. All of a sudden this thing just drops into the water standing straight up. Just falls in like there's a big hole in the bottom. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. I was so scared. The reason he never told me was because he didn't want me to be frightened, and because I was so young at the time.
I've got one, but it might need some explaining for you non-Irish. The Banshee, Beansea in Irish, is a type of fairy in Irish mythology that foretells the death of someone near a person that hears her screams. This is my granddad's story from the late 80s. Granda is in the hospital in Belfast recovering from a surgery. 3 other men staying in the same room. 2 a.m. rolls around and all is silent. Without warning, Granda hears a god-awful scream that fills the entire room. Granda jumps out of bed along with 2 of the other men, both of which seem equally startled. Scream lasts for about 10 seconds, then nothing. Third man, who didn't jump out of bed, asks what the hell they're doing. Granda tells the man about the scream and the other 2 back him up, but the third man isn't buying it. After another hour of shitting the bed, they all manage to nod off. Early next morning, Granda is awoken by doctors and nurses rushing into the room and moving a third man to ER. Granda asks around later that day. A third man suffered a fatal heart attack, and Bean C claimed her victim. I realize Belfast, being a large city, could very easily explain the scream, and the man's heart attack may well have been a coincidence. But stories like this aren't uncommon in Ireland even today, and it's a neat bit of mythology to boot.
I'll post my only paranormal experience. 19, driving with my sister to our parents' cabin to drink for the weekend. Got a late start, it's dark and still 2 more hours to get there. Turn down the logging road it's off of. Start to get stuck, so I hit it hard in reverse and tried to go through the non-flooded part. Had my high beams on, pitch black on the logging trail. Look in my rear view as a habit before I floor it again to try and get through the mud. 2 dim headlights, like a car with a battery dying, behind me. Figure someone turned onto the wrong path and tell my sister to stay in the truck. I'm going to ask if they are all right and that this is private property. Put on my coat and step out. Headlights are gone. Pitch black except for my rear floodlights I turned on. Run down the path about 30 feet and look down the straight paved road. Not a car in sight for at least 2 or 3 miles. There is no way someone could have driven 2 or 3 miles in the time it took me to run to the road. Maybe 10 seconds at very most, probably 6 or 7. Asked my sister if she saw the headlights too. Yes, of course. Didn't believe me, no one was there until I blacked out all my lights and could see no one was around for miles. That was about 9 years ago, and I still think about it.
Be me 15, staying at a hotel in Florida, sleeping in the same room as 12-year-old bro. We each have our own bed. Go to sleep one night, wake up abruptly in the middle of the night, which is rare for me. The door opens. It's dark, so I can't see the figure, but I assume it's my dad. A dark figure says, "I'm gonna sleep in here tonight." I just assume it's my dad because he sleeps separate from my mom, usually due to his snoring watch, as a dark figure lifts my brother's covers and slides in next to him. Think nothing of it and go back to sleep. Wake up again, but this time the figure says, "I'm going back," gets out of the covers and leaves whilst shutting the door afterwards. I think it's odd that my dad left in the middle of the night, but once again don't think anything of it and go back to sleep. Next morning ask Dad about it. "Anon, I wasn't in your room, WTF." I think he's joking with me, so I asked my brother if Dad got in bed with him. Brother says no WTF. Then I got concerned and genuinely asked them if he came into the room. They say no again and call me crazy.
Okay, so this happened last summer, but here goes. For the 4th of July, some friends and I decided to drive up to West Virginia. One of our pals has a cabin out there, so we packed some bags and planned on spending 3 nights in the forest. It wasn't much, but it was dry and had a flushing toilet, and there was some crazy lady down the mountainside who always had moonshine. We were sold. Billy, Brett, and I drove out there together. Joe and Katie were already there. It was Joe's cabin, and they'd been there a day or 2. When we got there, Katie warned us not to leave our stuff outside overnight. We could run around naked for all she cared. Wouldn't have been the first time, but anything related to food had to be burned completely or taken inside overnight. She said something had torn apart their trash, probably a black bear, which wasn't much of a surprise since they'd been spotted all over the area. Back up a bit, halfway to the mountains, driving from DC, Billy realized he forgot the directions. Naturally, we did what anyone would and called his wife to read off the directions. She gave him shit, of course, as a typical nagging wife does, and the rest of us pretty much ragged on him the rest of the day. I could tell he was getting pretty tired of our crap, but he took it like a champ. Billy just sat there and smiled as we drove, his head down, reading off the directions he wrote down. Due to Billy's dumb ass, we got there about 2 hours late. It was now around 6 p.m., well after our first round of Jell-O shots were due, and we were all pretty hot and tired of being twisted up in that car with a metric ton of bull, half of which was Billy's essential camping gear. We got unloaded and I sat my ass down in a chair. I don't remember exactly what I said. We all said a lot of things. But I gave Billy some kind of shit about the campfire he was trying to light, and he got pissed. It's kind of hard to tell when sunset is in the forest, in the mountains, since you can't really see the sun, but it was starting to look like dusk. Billy set off on a one-man hike to cool off. Meanwhile, Joe and Katie fired up a grill and started cooking, while Brett and I passed out a few beers and strung up a hammock. In that order, it was interesting. After a while, I realized it was getting pretty dark and Billy was still nowhere to be found. He set off with no flashlight, in a forest he'd never been to alone. And even after several drinks, I was wondering how much longer we should wait before trying to find him. The four of us were just discussing this when Billy showed up. I asked him where the hell he had been, and he said he'd just walked up the mountain a ways, then back down when he got tired. Whatever, it didn't make much sense, but then again, where would you go in a forest, besides to another part of the forest? We sat around the campfire for a while. Billy got there just in time because the chicken was just coming off the BBQ. We tossed around some jokes and bull, told a story or two, and had another round of drinks. I realized after a few minutes that Billy wasn't joining in, since he got back. About 20 minutes, he'd just been standing there staring at the campfire with this blank look on his face. It was a little unsettling. Actually, I can't really put my finger on it, but that's not what freaked me out the most. I looked Billy up and down, and he didn't look quite right. After a few drinks, I guess I hadn't paid much attention at first, but if you weren't looking at his face, you'd swear it was someone else. His shoulders were a bit too thin. Billy spent some time in the Marines and took that seriously. His legs were too short. It almost looked like his shorts were sagging, but they weren't. He just didn't have the right proportions. He turned all of a sudden, kind of jerked his head around, and looked at me and caught my stare. I really didn't know what to say. I just pretended to get distracted by something and looked away. Without much warning, Billy turned and started walking away pretty briskly. Brett asked him where the hell he was going. It was his turn to share a story or whatever. Billy said something about having to piss and didn't even slow down. He walked out behind the cabin, which was strange because he'd normally just whip it out on the nearest tree. I was pretty buzzed, so after a couple of minutes I figured maybe that was it. Maybe I'd had a little too much of that backwoods brew, and maybe he's still pissed at us. Who knows? But then Billy came back to the campfire. He was completely out of breath. Katie caught onto it first. We'd just watched him walk around the cabin, which was uphill from us. He came back from the opposite way, almost like he circled the whole property and hiked back from the bottom of the road. Billy immediately started asking if the food was done, said he was starving, and started telling us about this tree stand he found that some hunter must have abandoned out in the forest. Joe asked him how he was hungry after downing 3 pounds of chicken 10 minutes ago, but he had no idea what Joe was talking about. I was getting pretty uneasy at this point. I had no idea what the hell was going on, but I knew that something wasn't right. I know for a fact, even now, that whoever I saw standing by the campfire wasn't Billy. His clothes were right, I guess, but he didn't really look or sound the same. I tried talking to Brett about it, but he was pretty wasted and was having trouble finding his own pockets by then. It was useless. I don't remember going to bed, but I remember waking up. I crashed in the hammock and was the last one awake. I walked into the cabin and everyone else was already eating breakfast. Brett and Joe were pretty hungover and didn't say much at all. Halfway through our meal, Katie asked me, kind of asleep, where I put that awesome shirt I'd been wearing. I had no clue what she was talking about. Maybe she had more to drink than I thought. But then Joe asked me too. Apparently, sometime during the night, I'd walked into the cabin. I do not recall this. I was kind of scooting along like my leg was asleep, which got everyone's attention, except Billy, who was out cold, and I guess I was wearing some kind of orange camo jacket. At this point, I just knew they were screwing with me. I don't even own something like that. I said maybe it was Brett coming back from taking a piss, but no, they said, it was definitely me. They said I walked in, opened the cooler, and downed an entire pack of hot dogs before walking back out the door. I hate hot dogs. What the hell? The rest of the day went fine. We kind of brushed off what happened the night before. I had a feeling a couple of the others felt a little weird about it all, but nobody said anything. We just went about the day and had a good time. Katie caught Billy whacking off in the shower. Brett and I held Katie down while Billy gave her a lap dance. It was a good time, really. More fun than we'd had in quite a while. About sundown, we broke out the fireworks. It's the 4th of July after all, and we're not going to let the day go without blowing something up. Out came the Jell-O shots, the tequila, and the hot dogs, or for me, the marshmallows. It was party time. The guys and I wound up topless after a while, and Katie, embarrassed because Brett went streaking through the campsite, decided she was going to bed. She walked up to the cabin and we pretty much continued partying. More drinks went around, more snacks, more fireworks. We were just living the redneck dream, or whatever you'd call it. About halfway through our second Roman candle war, I noticed Katie standing next to me. It kind of startled me, but I was in the zone. Whatever, right? Maybe she felt left out. Brett and Joe were, as always, a little more drunk and a little more naked than the rest of us, so they tried to convince Katie to take her shirt off. She looked at Joe and laughed a little, tossing her head back. Billy grew some balls and joined in, telling her that he'd go streaking if she joined him. She always had a thing for Billy. Katie looked at Billy and laughed again, but it was weird. It was the same laugh, the same toss of her hair, the same little wince. I realized that's exactly what she did when Brett went charging through just an hour before. I didn't really have time to put things together before Joe made his move. He snuck up behind Katie and grabbed her shirt, trying to pull it up. I fully expected her to back away, to turn and run or slap him across the face, but she didn't. She just kind of froze up. She stopped breathing. And the strangest part of all was her shirt. I can't really describe it in a way that does it justice, but it was like her shirt was a part of her. It seemed to be connected, like it pulled on her body when Joe yanked it up. It couldn't come off because it was a piece of Katie herself, or whatever was standing there in her place. Joe, even as drunk as he was, looked confused for a moment, then started freaking out. He later told me that when he grabbed that shirt, or what he thought was a shirt, it retracted. It pulled itself from his hands, almost like a muscle contracting, trying to escape. Katie, or what looked like Katie, stood there silent, motionless, and Joe started to run. I had a pretty good idea why he was running, and I think Brett saw too, but Billy was a little thicker in the skull. We grabbed him and told him to head back to the cabin, back inside. He tried to grab Katie, but I yelled to leave her, pulled his hand away, and we got inside as fast as we could. We weren't even being chased. It was just one of those moments when we realized we were out in the elements, exposed on all sides with something we didn't understand bearing down on us. We were about to fill Billy in when Katie hopped up from the couch almost in panic, asking what the hell was going on. I kind of recoiled, wondering if I could trust her. Who the hell was she? Who the hell was outside? What was going on? Billy asked her how the hell she ran inside so fast. Then he started freaking out with the rest of us. Don't think he understood why, though. Joe grabbed her shirt and her shorts and tugged on them and asked her what her birthday was. He was in a full-blown fight-or-flight mode still, and she answered him right, thank God. She was the real deal and confused. She must have thought we'd been smoking something, even as we tried to explain everything, and Billy was trying to figure it all out too. Joe tried filling her in, but it wasn't much use. Billy looked out the window and got Brett's attention, and Brett got Katie's attention. He said if she doesn't believe us, then what is outside? Katie, Joe, and I joined the others at the window and looked down the hill towards the campfire, and there was the creature. Still Katie, apparently staring straight at us. Katie thought it was a joke, maybe something we rigged up to look like her, until it lurched forward and doubled over. It hit the ground on all fours and made a number of short yipping sounds, which sounded somewhat like that laugh again, only when it stood back up it wasn't Katie, it was me. We all kind of freaked out. I mean, the clothes were right, the hair was right. It seemed to take a moment for the proportions to work out. It had my face, but Katie's hips until it twisted, almost like dislocating its hips, and it stood up taller to match my figure. About that time, a shot rang out. Joe had a rifle stashed over the door and apparently decided he'd had enough of this. The creature, whatever the hell that was, laughed one more time, with a jittery little head motion, kind of like before, and then walked backwards into the woods. We were wide awake until the sun came up. We packed up just our clothes and whatever we could carry. The food, hammock, and all of our non-essential shit is still out there in the forest, and as far as I'm concerned, I can live without it. I'm never going back. Fuck camping.
Not paranormal, but still creepy as hell. I got a flat tire last summer due to some metal scrap on the interstate making scrap of my tire. Great. Now I'm stranded on the interstate at midnight. Call AAA for a tow, but they won't be there for an hour or two, so I'm stuck playing on my phone. After about an hour, I see headlights behind me, and I start to get ready to get out. Before I open the door, I realize that it isn't a tow truck behind me. It's another car. Maybe they are stopping to check on me? The headlights turn off, but no one gets out. It just sits there, and I can't tell who's in it. At this point, I'm freaking out, so I go dark. I put my phone down low and try not to move. I don't have any weapons in my car, and I'm not about to get robbed while I'm stranded on the side of the road. The tow truck finally shows up at 2 a.m. I still haven't seen any lights from the car behind me, and no movement. The driver looks back and asks me if they are my ride. He gave me the same nope look I'm sure I had on my face when I told him they just rolled up and were sitting there for an hour. Screw the interstate, man.
This one wasn't too freaky when it happened, but when you look back on it, it's pretty screwed up. B13. Hanging with friends live 5-minute walk from a medium shopping mall with lots of shops nearby. If anyone wants to know where it was, it's Crossroads Mall in Bellevue, Washington. Walk through the park at sunset to get pizza. Pick up pizza at Domino's and start walking back. It's not too late, so I decided to go through the park. Start walking through the park. Don't go through normal entrance. Walk behind the community center. This area is grassed and silent, so no one would be able to hear me walking. Walk onto a concrete area. Start walking up the 5-step area to get to the park. The concrete area has tall bushes so you can't see into the main park area. After getting to the top of the steps, there's a man in a tracksuit standing on the walkway with his hands to his sides, not moving. Wait a second to see if he's going to move because no one else is around. After a few seconds, he still hasn't moved an inch. Not going to mess with a druggo, so go back to the concrete area and decide to chill and eat pizza and do something on my Huawei smartphone. After 10 or 15 minutes, decide to head back with the pizza and go home. Stand up, walk to the stairs, take a few steps up. Then I saw him. The man is standing in the same exact spot as before and has not moved in 15 minutes. I turned around and went the long way home because I thought that guy must have been on something.
One of the only times I've seen something. Living with aunt because of reasons, hanging out with cousins, listening to music, discussing life, jobs, etc. We were sitting in a triangle position, 2 of them on a bed and me sitting in a gaming chair thing. They are talking about something and I see an orb of blackish purple something phase out of the wall. It had like a 3D shadow around it. So enamored by it that I didn't tell them to look. Enamored and scared like I'm in danger or something. Phases back into the wall. Tell them what I saw. I don't know what it was, but I know it wasn't a good thing. My cousin told me they know something is inhabiting their house. He said he was talking to his mom with his friend, and she saw the reflection of his friend looking at her while he was talking to my cousin.
Okay, so I was actually just about to make a thread about this because I just remembered, but it fits here. Didn't happen to me as such, but I witnessed it. Be in high school, some 10 years ago. Okay, actually more like 16 years ago, but I don't like to think about that. There's this group of goth girls who think they're witches. Everyone would make fun of them and they'd say they put spells on them, etc. One day in class, one of these girls was sitting next to me, just staring at her pencil. I was admiring her rings, I think, or a bracelet or something, so I was looking over at her. Suddenly the pencil starts to roll back and forth on the desk. Think it's strange, but the desks were sort of wonky, so if she was moving her leg, it would have done that. Then the thing stands up, all on its own, so it's just balancing on the lead in the middle of the desk. Other people notice. Someone says, "What the hell?" breaks her concentration and the pencil falls. She just goes on to taking notes like nothing happened. Now, I refuse to believe this girl or her group were actually witches, but I have no idea what to think. Another weird thing with them is that my kid brother was friends with one of their sisters, and he said that her sister put a spell on her so she would lose all her hair, and they were just laughing about it. But then she was diagnosed with alopecia. I'm just glad I was always civil to them.
Be me, 13 years old. Just moved into a new house in the middle of nowhere a few months prior. The AC unit was right next to my bedroom window, which was annoying sometimes, but I dig the white noise. One night, it was a full moon. Super hot in my room, I open the window, and that temporarily fixes the problem. Still pretty hot, so I end up just trying to fall asleep next to the window. I hear the creaking of the AC unit, like a raccoon or a bobcat got on top of it. Take a quick peek to see some nocturnal wildlife action. All I see is this giant blob of orange-brown fur looming menacingly over, blocking out the moon. Talking, at least 8 feet tall. Shrink back beneath my covers at the speed of sound. Have a pillow on top of my head with an opening just wide enough to see the window with my left eye. Heartbeats feel like gunshots. Start drowning in cold sweat. Its massive head slowly comes into view, eerily backlit by the moon. The face is black, leathery, and pushed in like a Persian cat with a really big toothy grimace across its face, with beady eyes the size of golf balls. It opens its mouth and I hear this dreadful screaming, loud as a jet turbine. But it's coming from inside my own head. I literally start crying. Close my eyes, the scream ends in a gurgle. Peek towards the window. It's gone. I didn't sleep in my room for a solid month. I probably didn't sleep for a solid month.
11 years old. Approximately 1:30 a.m. Live in a mobile home in a rural part of North Carolina. Maybe 1 or 2 houses for at least a 15-minute drive. I get up from watching YouTube videos on the computer to get some more Mountain Dew. The kitchen has a window with no curtains where you can see out to the dirt road that the house is on. Decide for whatever reason to look outside. See a man, approximately 40 years old, wearing a suit and tie, just standing there in the middle of the road, staring directly at me. Run and get my mom, who is watching TV in her room. She thinks I'm lying, but gets up anyways, because I was obviously freaking out. She sees the man standing there and turns white as a sheet, obviously spooked. What the hell? I look again, and now he's got this horrified expression on his face, mouth dropped and eyes wide like he's seen some shit. Mom gets balls of steel and decides to go outside and try to call out and see if he needs help or something. As soon as she opens the door, the guy takes off full sprint, running faster than any human could run. I'm talking freakishly fast, faster than Usain Bolt could run. Jumps easily over a barbed wire fence into a cow pasture and disappears into the woods. Mom calls 911 and tells them what happened. Police come out and search the tree line and see nothing. Didn't go outside to ride my bike or play or explore for like 2 weeks after, because I was so spooked. Never see the man or thing ever again. Mention it to my mom years later, but she refuses to talk of it or denies it ever happened. I still have no idea what we saw.
Last Friday, driving home from working a double. I pull into the subdivision and am just pressing on the gas to go uphill when I suddenly see a dog standing in the middle of the road. Adult golden retriever, full coat, looked well fed and had no obvious health problems, no collar either. Immediately stopped my car and put it into park to see what it would do. It just stands there for a few seconds before calmly wandering up the street. Get out of the car to try calling to it. It doesn't approach, but it doesn't get spooked or try to run away either. K.bitmap. Get back into the car to start driving again, but more slowly in case the dog might still be on the road, since it's nighttime and the pavement makes a sharp turn. It's nowhere to be seen. I didn't see or hear any apparent owner anywhere nearby. And no one in my neighborhood goes on late-night walks. It might have been a stray, but the way it reacted to me in my car was so unusually apathetic that it felt out of place for any dog, especially for a golden. Bonus detail is how a killer thunderstorm came in about 10 minutes later. Praise Thunder Doggo.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.